Hello and welcome to one of the inaugural episodes of AGEUcational podcast. My name is Roy and my co-host is
Terry.
So what we're going to be doing is we're going to talk about pretty much everything aging. We're going to try to provide information. We're not only going to talk about the journey that we're on with our parents and, of course, in our life. I'm not going to Terry under the bus, but, as I approach that age where I need to take more care. So what we're going to target, the senior population, adult children, caregivers, and then again, people like myself who are moving into that age to trying to learn how to see what we can do to age healthy and to help those that are needing some extra help, and of course our caregivers, trying to provide them some support as well. So please bear with us as we kind of get through these first few episodes. We'll be learning a lot, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we've got a lot of great information and some great guests to bring to you. So without further ado, we'll talk to our first guest is David Moyer. He runs a website called Udumo. And we were going through some pronunciation lessons before that, but David is a certified senior advisor and developed the Caregiving Toolkit that educates family members on how to start the conversation with your parents through end of life and beyond, so that everyone knows what to expect and can make informed, confident decisions when the time comes. The Caregiver Toolkit has 14 lessons, 80 plus videos, and 30 assessments and worksheets to walk families through this journey. Of course, David experiences firsthand hearing stories of others in similar or worse situations. Was David's motivation to do something. His approach was to provide education to anyone who was facing similar situations. David became a certified senior advisor, and the experience led him to develop Udumo to be able to reach out to people and help. The goal of the website and David is to honor your parents by educating you, the caregiver, so that you have knowledge to provide a better life to your parent or loved one. Honor, knowledge, love. So David, we appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us, and welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Roy and Terry. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. And this is, I guess, since this is one of our inaugural issues, we'll kind of get some of our information out. I spent 20 years or more consulting with the business side of senior living communities. So I got to see a lot, from mystery shopping to looking at finances to looking at, how care was delivered, and started AGEUcational as kind of the same experience, just to put information out there for seniors and their families, because since we were in the business, we had continually had friends and relatives that came to us asking for information, and it's just it's becoming more readily available, but the quality and who you can trust is always an issue. So that led me to begin AGEUcational, putting information out, and then after a while, my life kind of moved in a different direction. But the last few months, both Terry has gone through some issues with her mother, who's still living. And then, of course, my parents are both still living, so we have things that are on the horizon as well. So we felt like in conjunction with some written material that we push out, that, starting a podcast would be very educational, very AGEUcational for all of us. So that's kind of the where we started at. So anyway, let's just kind of jump into it. So now, I thought I remember reading, David, that you also pretty much experienced this. You and your wife had kind of gone through similar situations with your parents. Is that correct?
Yeah, Roy, that's right. Several times with our direct parents, our step parents, and unfortunately 2 siblings. So
Okay.
in the course of probably 10 years, 10 or 12 years, I think it was. There was eight people going through
Wow.
that, and in various stages. Some that had everything taken care of, and it was, nice, and all the care was there. And others, it was just a battle trying to get the basic benefits and health assessments and health care delivered. And dealing with the state, dealing with the county, dealing with the federal government for those benefits was just difficult beyond all belief.
Right. And, a lot of times, even though we age, I say slowly, sometimes we have issues that hit us and something happens all at once. But even though we see our parents or loved ones that age over time, all of a sudden we usually wait till we're in a critical spot in order to start taking some action. And I think that's kind of part of your message too, is to let's get out in front of this a little bit. Let's make some preparations, some plans, so we don't put so much pressure on our caregivers, right, our kids, our loved ones at that time.
Yeah, and it all starts with a conversation. There's a framework that I use called CARE, Conversation, Assessment, Roadmap, and Education. And the conversation is just start the conversation. Get right, things going before you're in that crisis moment. And it's not a conversation anymore. It's much worse. It's a shouting match or a screaming match or something like that.
Yeah, and what listeners may not be as much aware of as some of us that have been around this for a while is that, especially, I think these statistics are more for your Alzheimer's, those that have Alzheimer's, but caregivers can actually die 60 to 80%, depending on the study you read. They will die sooner than the person that they're giving care to. It is just that stressful.
Right. And it is a stressful situation. I mean, you think of a baby and you're having fun. They're always learning something new. They're gaining abilities. On the opposite end of that is they're forgetting stuff and they're losing abilities. And that is phenomenally stressful to see somebody that has raised you lose those abilities. And that stress is taken into your own body, mind and body stress, and it just wears everybody down.
Yeah. And, I used to be I was a volunteer long-term care ombudsman here in Tarrant County where we live for, I don't know, probably 6 or 8 years. And then what we can add on top of that is if the family members don't agree, or if they all want to be in charge, then that can add another level of stress, just beyond belief. I mean, I can't even tell you some of the atrocities that I have seen, and it wasn't the the senior's fault. That it was the family
dynamic.
Yeah, and Terry, I'll let her talk about that a little bit. She had 2 sisters that when her father got the diagnosis, I think they were able to kind of move through the process easily. There wasn't a lot of conflict, but that's
I have a sister who lives close by, and then we're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and then I have another sister in California. And my sister, when my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, my oldest sister who lives nearby, we both said, okay, this is it. She's going to take dad and I'm going to take mom. And that's what we did. So she was in charge of, finding them. I helped, of course, as much as I could, as much as she'd let me because she's so alpha. But and finding care and all of that for right. Dad. And it was, it was at least a 12-year process.
Right.
But it was not a fun process.
And it always, the other part of that is we think it just, you get a diagnosis and then that's that. But depending on where you are in that phase, it will change over time. And, we've all seen that with the, like I had a neighbor across the street from where we live that, she actually got out in the middle of the night and had come across the street and got in one of our cars. I woke up in the morning with all the red lights out front, and went out to see what was going on. And her husband was doing the very best he could to take care of her at home, but she got out. It was about a 20-degree night that she ended up in a vehicle, and luckily it didn't she didn't freeze to death or get sick or anything. But again, as you progress through this, things can change, so it's always a moving target, it seems.
Right, and that's where assessments come in. You assess the situation, you assess pretty much everything, the ability of your parent or child or spouse even on a regular basis. Can they do this? Can they do that? And Terry, there's a whole division of care capability in that. Okay, just like you did, split up your parents with responsibilities. You take your mom, your sister take your dad, and work through that. So having those constant assessments, where are we today or where are we next month? And they start, you start seeing this just like a child. It's like, oh, there's a new ability. This is nice. They can now, say their first word or take their first step. And it's on the opposite end. It's, okay, it looks like, mom is having trouble remembering where the spatula was to cook. Do we now need to assess her in front of the stove, or dad driving? And that's the big one that everybody hits everybody at the most is driving ability. So doing those assessments on a regular basis keeps the family engaged, and it also helps the parent or spouse or child understand the progression of it. So it's not a shock.
Can I ask something, just for my purposes? What exactly is a certified senior advisor?
So certified senior advisors are those that are interested in helping families walk through this process. It's a dual certification, and it's tested by nationally or national companies and authorized companies that go through a series of studies and workbooks and classes that walk you through the entire life cycle of aging people. So everything from family dynamics, which you brought up, Terry, and how to work with them, to working with financial planners and working with physicians and nurses and home care agencies and those things. So it's a very detailed study program and certified test that people will go through so they can help seniors and their families go through this process with less angst, anxiety, stress,
Right.
and doubt kind of thing. So a lot of
I think the other benefit to the CSA designation is that the members are held to a higher standard. So to me, it's an extra level of protection that is in there for seniors and their families. If you're talking to a certified senior advisor, not only do they have the product knowledge, the service knowledge, but they've got the knowledge of the aging process, how to deal, and what is how to deal ethically, I think, is the most important part, because sometimes as we as seniors age, they may be in that little forgetfulness, and people run out unethical people will run out there and try to get them to sign some documents when they know that they're not in the capacity in order to take on whatever that responsibility is. So I think it's definitely worth publicizing, if you can, to seek out somebody that's, if you're dealing with aging or elderly issues, to deal with somebody who is a CSA certified.
Yeah, and I was just going to bring up the ethical part of it, because these are confidential conversations. I mean, they stay with the family, and they're with the family. Just like a CPA or a CFP or a physician, they're confidential conversations that you keep between the family and the CSA.
So I just wanted to kind of go back to your website for just a little bit, and we'll give, at the end of the episode, we'll give all the information how people can reach out. But you've got this broken up into, it looks like 3 sections, and then I think this 4th one is kind of putting them all together. But just correct me if I'm wrong here, but it looks like we have the part of start the conversation, which we've been talking about. Start the conversation, assess situation, the division of care. So Terry and them walked right down this list so far. Then we have that remote caregiving, which it's become more common as people are spread out all across the country.
Yeah, and Terry's already experiencing that with her sister. So and we actually put that in there because my wife and I, the family, is on the East Coast, and my wife is from the West Coast. So we had her flying back and forth, and spent a lot of vacation working with her parents and spending it out there with them. But I was flying her back and forth when she could. And while she was there, I was back here with the kids and working full time. So it's the stress. And part of that remote caregiving, one of the important things is setting thresholds, because you're either jumping on a plane or driving for some number of hours, 2, 3, 4, 10 kind of thing. So you have to understand the threshold. Okay, what event is going to trigger me to jump on the plane or get in the car and drive for 5 hours? So knowing those and setting those ahead of time drops that stress level down, instead of, okay, this happened, I'm going. And then, 2 weeks later, that happened, I'm going. And it just wears you down.
Yeah, definitely. Which kind of leads into the next one, is the caring for yourself.
Exactly.
I think the old adage is, we have to take care of ourselves before we take care of anybody else. So, and I see that a lot before with the caregivers will be so run down and so tired, and you can just see the toll that it's taken on them. But anyway, so we get through the estate planning, all the documents, build the plan, and then the second module in this is the aging in place or move, which again, a huge decision where because most seniors do not want to move, and I understand that, but sometimes for safety, as my neighbor escaped, so there's the security, keeping them secure. There's a lot that wraps around that, but again, it's a conversation that it's hard to say it's time to move today, so we're loading up the truck and taking you somewhere.
How do you start that conversation?
Well, first, it's the conversation should be, we're going to try and keep you in your house or your home as long as possible, but we need to do some things to do that. Pull up the rugs, the loose rugs. There's a huge number of senior citizens that fall because they slip on a rug and they hit their head and they're concussed, and then that leads to, okay, I'm not going home again. So pull up the rugs, pull things that they can slip on, pull out, remove the chairs that have the extended legs out into the walk path. When you get old, your sight is diminished, so put more lights out. Light up the place with LED. Now it's LEDs. You can do that for less expensive than light bulbs. So light up the house so they can see clearly. They have bending issues. So, if you've ever gotten up out of a chair and you go, oh, my back.
Many times lately.
Well, bending down in the kitchen, or bending to get in and out of a tub, or, bending into a closet, or a reaching. A lot of people, so I'll just get on the step stool and reach up there. Well, no more step stools, because balance is off. The older you get, the more unbalanced you are. So it's those simple things that you can do to keep them in their house and home. But then also look at activities of daily living. So you're doing those assessments on a regular basis, and independent activities of daily living. And there's a set of those that you can look up anywhere, just IADL or ADL, independent activities of daily living, or like shopping on your own or driving a car or doing financial transactions and things like that. So those are the things that help you decide. And if you work with your parent or spouse on those things, they will actually look at them and say, yeah, I need some help doing this, instead of, no, I've got it. And you know, my experience was my dad was German, full German. My mom is full-blooded Italian. So, you know, I was raised in a conflicted life. So,
Yeah.
you know, real passionate about certain things, but I got to get it right. You know,
Right.
my dad didn't want any help, none whatsoever. And my mom was just the opposite. Said, yeah, here's the bank account, here's this, here's that. Tell me what to do. You know, come help.
Right.
So you're going to have those differences in spouses and care.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point too about the generational differences, because you know, when my grandmother got into this position, she was the same way. It was like, you know, my grandfather had taken care of everything. He had passed probably at that point 20 years prior to her. So she had been living on her own for, you know, a good 15 or 20 years. But when it came time to say, you know, do you want us to give you some help? She was like, yeah, please do. So she was good. Now, mom working, you know, she had a very a successful career. Trying to wrestle anything away from her, that is going to be a whole nother challenge. And then,
That's right.
but the other part, the other part I wanted to touch on with this, with the move, is the socialization piece. And again, I'm going to use my grandmother as an example. Um, she lived alone on the other side of town. Wasn't a big deal. And you know, she still mowed her yard and she did everything. It wasn't the security risk wasn't her getting out as much as, you know, I was worried people watching her would try to get in on top of her, you know, in her house, number one. But she stayed in the house because, well, she said because of church and her friends in the, you know, in the neighborhood. They had lived there for 50 years or so. But, you know, what we began talking to her about was that she didn't like driving to church anymore, and most of her friends had passed by this point. And so really, you know, the benefit of her staying, uh, she was giving up a lot of socialization basically. And so that is one other, I think a key element is that to a lot of to some it's not a big deal, but to others that socialization component is huge. And she went to an independent living community and she flourished. I mean, I would go over there to visit her and I could not catch up with her. She'd be, you know, down in the puzzle room. She'd be at the friend's house playing cards or dominoes. And it was one of the best moves for her ever. But, you know, that's very individual because there's some people that, you know, they just don't fit in, don't take part. So the socialization component's not a huge factor. So that is definitely something to consider.
And that's part of the assessments that you need to do, is how social is your parent or spouse or child. I mean, if they're out, you know, if they're an extrovert and on social media and going and playing tennis and, you know, all kinds of things, that's part of the assessment, and say, okay, we have to keep that up, you know,
Right.
and make sure that's part of their life so they can continue on like that. Because here's an example. What, when you're a criminal and you're a really bad criminal, what's the first thing they do? Put you in isolation. And that's what breaks you down. You know, it's like, okay, think about this. So if you're taking a social person and isolating them in some environment where they have no ability to talk to somebody, or not physical ability, but no ability to reach out, they're eventually going to shut down and it's going to affect their health.
Right.
And that's
Right.
that's a big impact that COVID has had on a lot of facilities where they've completely shut down, and the only people that are in and out are the nurses and doctors. So family
Right.
isn't allowed in there, and you know that's the case with my mom. is they closed down in late February. They were one of the first facilities to close down. And I didn't see her until September. I called her on the phone,
Wow.
but
Yeah.
September they allowed physical distance visits, and that went on for about a month. It was every 2 weeks. You were allowed to come in and physically distance yourself, masks, shields, all that kind of stuff. And it was 12 feet apart, which was, so think about this. You're behind a plexiglass shield, you've got masks on, and you're 12 feet apart from somebody that's hard of hearing. So,
Yeah.
Oh
Right.
gosh.
you know,
Yeah.
so it's those things. You got it. And that's you're back to the assessments when you're moving somebody into a facility or group homes. Group homes are another opportunity where you have people of the same age and the um, same abilities, same social mix, and those kinds of things. There's a lot of group homes that are starting up because CCRCs are continuous care retirement communities are can be expensive. I mean, $4,500 to $6,000 a month, kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's been a conversation in the industry for the last few years. Some of the architects would finally come to conferences and fess up that, we've got to do better being
Right.
affordable, because right now we're all trying to outdo each other to see who can build the biggest, the best, and this. And then, in some instances, you price people out of that market.
Right.
Don't want to get into, too deep into that, but, the funding for retirement has changed a lot too. That, back in the day, you retired from a company, you had a designated amount of money that they would send to you every month. Well, most companies by now have switched over to the contribution type plan where, you put money in, and then when you retire, you've got X number of dollars that you've got to make last. You've got to manage it on your own. So, that is definitely something to look at, because that, working with marketing in that world, when residents would come in for the first time, that was always the very first thing is, I can't afford it. They are deathly afraid of running out of money, deathly afraid of not being able to leave even a small legacy to their children or grandchildren. Right. So, definitely part of the process to think about how to pay for the different styles of living. But
so here's it's good that you're sitting down, because here's the shocker. I've got a 20-year-old, and he will live past 100 years old. No question in my mind. Yeah. He will live. So the average age now is 80 and 82 for men and women. Very shortly, I'm saying probably 10, maybe 15 years, that'll creep up to 88 and 90. And then in 20, maybe 30 years, it'll easily hit 100. And if you follow the longevity science that is taking off like wildfire, they're projecting 120 and even 150.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So they look at it as aging as a disease, not inevitable. So if you're looking at it that way, retiring at 65 or 60 or 70, it's not going to happen anymore. In your finances, I mean, I tell people that when I work with them, I say you have to plan on finances lasting until you're 100.
Right. Well, in I think the joke in the financial services industry that it's the I guess the myth that's been perpetrated by population that in the financial industry we try to dispel is that when you retire, your spending typically doesn't go from 100% to 20% of whatever you were making, because people want to retire and they want to do things. They want to travel. They still have needs. And so it's kind of a myth that, we always try to bust, is that you are going to need, probably 80% of your current income, to live in retirement. And then you stretch that out. And, it's, I guess when you think about it, it shouldn't be such a shock, because when I was growing up, and I don't have the empirical evidence on this, but just intuitively, it seemed like that people back then, 60, 65, and that was a pretty long life. Where now we're, up into the 80s and 90s is not unheard of. It's, very common.
Yeah, the number of people over 100 just in the US is increasing substantially every year.
So that kind of brings us to the next component, is the last days and arrangements. And this is difficult, and it's not necessarily difficult for us old people to talk about, because it's our kids. And I've tried to talk to my daughter before, and she'll put her hands over her ears and say, hey, I don't want to talk about that. And even Terry, it's some things that we've discussed, and it's uncomfortable, because we don't ever want to think of our loved one not being here, passing. But on the other hand, again, if we wait until that happens, then all of a sudden we're in crisis mode. Decisions have to be made in a hurry. If bank accounts and other things aren't titled right, and have succession plans for them, then all of a sudden sometimes money can be frozen for periods of time as well. So there's a lot of implications of not planning.
Right. I mean, the money part is the simplest thing, because that can be taken care of through an attorney. So you get powers of attorney set up, your living will set up, your will, your estate plan, and those are, I mean, you're talking $500, $600. They're pretty straightforward. And you can even do that yourself. There's several places online that you can do that yourself. You just have to be careful that you get the one for the state that you or your parent lives in, because the states all have differences, minor differences. But beyond that, it's, how do you want to be remembered? Just look at this. Look at obituaries, and it's facts and figures. Born this date, died that date, married this date, these children, worked here, did that, but there's nothing about the person in that. So, go back and ask your mom or dad and say, how do you want to be remembered? Not just the organizations you worked for, but your life. Your life is more than the companies. Yeah. And that will open up more conversations than you can imagine when you talk. And here's the golden part of the golden years, if you want. You're having those in-depth conversations with your parents. I never knew that my mom was scared to death of riding on motorcycles. Until we got into a conversation, I go, why are you so scared? And she goes, my brother at 3 years old used to put me in. Now, understand, this is like way back when. Her brother had a motorcycle, and her brother was responsible for taking care of. So at 3 years old, when he wanted to go somewhere, he grabbed my mom and laid her across the tank of the motorcycle, and off they went.
Oh my God.
So
ouch.
So, yeah, and
I remember doing that on regular bikes,
Sure.
riding on the handlebars and stuff like that. But man, to have a motor right there, that's crazy. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, getting back to the obituaries, it's funny you bring that up, because it used to be kind of a running joke that I tell my kids, say more than, because there was a bunch that came out, it seemed like at one time, like they were born, they were a Baptist, and they died. And I'm like, okay, well, we can probably find hopefully a couple more facts to fling in there, to talk about. But, it gets back to having that conversation, what, cremation versus burial, where, because I've got some very specific places that I've seen in my life that I would love to be, interred there. Some people not some people not that don't really care that much about it, but it's the problem. What I have seen is that after somebody passes is too, unless they've left a detailed outline, it's too late to ask at that point. And
Right.
so then
Right.
that heaps on some more guilt that we really don't know, or we really didn't talk about it. So it can be uncomfortable, but we can make it we can kind of lighten it up and make it a little funner, but it's just something that needs to be done for sure.
Yeah, I say don't wait till you're staring at the funeral director's face to figure this out.
Right,
Get it all
exactly.
done ahead of time. And, you know, good thing or bad thing, there's a lot more options to handle remains now. I mean, you can shoot them up in space now. You can
Right.
put them as a coral reef in the ocean. You can, I mean, green burials are really taking off now, where there's no
Yeah.
embalming, and the remains are in the ground within a day or two, and they naturally
Right.
decompose. Or there's places all over the states now, all throughout Europe, where you can have these, and they're forested areas where natural decomposition takes over. So there's different ways for everybody to do
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah, my daughters tell me, well, I'm going to be cremated, so my daughters keep sending me a little note saying that they're going to turn me into a Pat Benatar CD or a Heart CD or something like that. I'll haunt them forever.
That's right. That's right. That's a good one. I hadn't heard that one, but yeah, the options are available.
Well, David, we want to thank you so much for taking time, not only to be, one of our inaugural guests. We certainly appreciate that. But this is great information. I think it's something that everybody can benefit from, no matter where we are, either as the aging individual or where we are as the adult child. It's never too early. And I think you make a point about, some of these conversations we can actually get some details or get to know our parents or a little bit better,
Right.
Or some of these details that we may not have known in the past because we just didn't have the conversation. So always great. But tell people, if you don't mind, how that they can reach out. Well, what can you do for them? Number one, I know you've got this Caregiver Toolkit, but what can you do for them? And then, of course, how they can reach out and get a hold of you.
Sure, and thank you for that opportunity. The site is
Yeah.
Udumo. It's UDUMO.co. And Udumo is a Zulu word for honor, and I use that as in honor your parents. It's one of the things that we can do for them. They raised us, and I realized not everybody had a great childhood, but sometimes that can be rebuilt later in life. So we can honor our parents through this part of their life. And what goes around comes around. So your children are going to see you honor your parents, so they can do the same thing with you when it comes your time. So the site is udumo.co, Udumo. And there's, as you said, Roy, there's the course that's up there that helps people walk through the conversations, does the assessments, helps you do all the assessments, division of care, home maintenance, when you're going through a facility, use your 5 senses in the facility, those kinds of things, all the way to past the end of life when you're shutting somebody's life down, if they have a business, or the estate plan and doing those things. So all of that is laid out there so you can build a roadmap with your parents or spouse or loved ones and make it easier. I always say, if you know where you're going, if you have a map and know where you're going, the journey is much easier versus, well, what should we do now? So that's all
Right.
up there. And that's on the website. You can get a hold of me there. There's emails up there, david@udumo.co. It's there for everybody. And we lots of good comments coming back on the course and assessments, and we're always adding new stuff up there. And one of the other things I do is there's a links page on the website. So you go up there and it's on the upper right-hand corner on links. And if you want to do it yourself and you don't want to, use the toolkit that we have, there's a bunch of links up there to go through and find people that can do things for you. So I'm not opposed to that. It's get the help out there, get people to start talking about these things and give them statistics and give them, the Alzheimer's and dementia associations and certified financial planners and CAPS. In an earlier conversation, we talked about certified aging in place specialists to come into your home and take a look at it to keep your parent in there as long as possible. And for $150, it's worth it. And because now you have an independent authority coming in and saying these are the things to keep you in your home. So now you and your parent can walk through that. Okay, mom and dad, what do you want to do? What can we do? And they'll give you the cost for each one of them. So that's what the whole links page is up there for. So it's
That's great.
use the resources, or please just use the resources on the links page. And if you'd like the whole roadmap, it's there in bits and pieces. And as you said, Roy, the complete caregiving toolkit is also the option. So it depends on where you are in the stage of life with your parent, or take the whole thing and get started now.
It's never too early to get started. We will just make
Right.
that. It's this is about education. It's about knowing where to turn at those moments and not waiting till we get in the moment to have to figure things out when it's a crisis. That's more stress. We tend to make not as good decisions because we don't know what all of our options are. So go take a look at the website and download some of these tools that will be very helpful as your parents or as you go through the aging process, because it can work both ways especially on the discussion part. We can get those as the older person and start that conversation with our children as well.
For sure. It's, if you're of that age, then you want your children engaged and say, look, here's the assessments, and we're going to walk through them with your children. And it'll take the fear, uncertainty, and doubt from the child off and say, oh, okay, now my parents want to talk about this, and let's build the roadmap together.
Right. All right, David. Well, again, thanks a lot. And this is going to do it for this episode of AGEUcational podcast. Please visit us at AGEUcational.com. We do have a Facebook group that we would like to ramp up some conversations in there. So please go over there if you have questions, if you have show ideas, if you are a professional that serves seniors, we'd love to hear from you. If you're a senior that has a good story, we'd love to hear from you. An adult child that wants to put their this is, in the beginning, especially, we may refine our mission as we move on. But, in the beginning, we want to hear from a wide range of individuals to let people know, first off, you're not alone going through this. There are other people that have been through it, going through it, and then where we can go get that help as well. So until next time, I'm Roy.
I'm Terry.
Take care of each other.
David, thank you so much.
Thank you. And continue on. What you're doing is good.
Thank you, David.